Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me to go over some highlights of Budget 2024, which will also serve as the 23-24 third quarter fiscal update. The theme of this year's budget is a responsible plan for a growing province. I know there's been a lot of speculation leading up to today about what this budget would look like. Would we make drastic cuts to boost our bottom line? Would we spend it all while times are good? Would we abandon our plan to pay down debt and stabilize our finances in the long term? If I could turn things around and ask you a question about this budget, it would be, what would you do? What would you do if you and your family had a pretty good year? Maybe your income got a bit of a bump. Maybe you were able to cut back on expenses a bit. Whatever the case, when you sat down to look at your family budget for the next year, what would you do? Would you hit the book now button on that trip somewhere warm and worry about the rest when you get back? Would you sock it all away for a rainy day and make your family go without until then? Chances are you probably wouldn't do either of these things. Chances are you'd look at what you needed to take care of now and what you knew was coming up in the next few years and make a careful plan, a responsible plan. A plan that would make strategic investments to support your family today and make sure they're supported in the future. We did the same thing when we planned Budget 2024. Today I'd like to outline the strategic investments we are making to support Albertans today and maintain Alberta's economic growth into the future. Budget 2024 is a responsible plan to strengthen healthcare and education. It builds safe and supportive communities, manages our resources wisely, and promotes job creation to build Alberta's competitive advantage. It is a solid budget based on measured fiscal choices that improve the lives of Albertans to help our province realize its full potential. Budget 2024 is another balanced budget with a forecasted surplus of $367 million in 24-25. This responsible plan strikes the right balance between investing wisely to meet the needs of Albertans today and ensuring those services remain sustainable to support the next generations. With this roadmap, we are meeting our promise to support a thriving and successful province no matter what challenges lay ahead. We are refocusing the healthcare system so every Albertan has access when and where they need it. We are investing in a bright future for our children with new and modernized schools and learning supports for students of all abilities. Budget 2024 keeps life more affordable for families and provides services and supports for those in need. We're also investing in a safe and secure Alberta by providing mental health, addiction, and police supports so all Albertans feel secure and welcomed. We're protecting and managing our resources wisely by safeguarding communities and our economy from potential natural disasters. Finally, Budget 2024 is maintaining Alberta's competitive advantage, boosting jobs, attracting investment, and strengthening our position as the nation's economic engine. The future is promising as Alberta's economy continues to gain momentum. Following a year of solid growth, we expect people will continue to flock to Alberta, driving up our population by 3.7% in 2024. Job gains will continue, which will help industries facing labor shortages to attract and retain more workers. We're also welcoming investment from across Canada and around the world. We have a bioethanol plant coming to Calgary, a milk plant near Blackfalds, and a chocolate facility in Stony Plain. There's the Dow Chemicals Net Zero Emissions Ethylene Cracker, the Air Products Hydrogen Facility, the McCain Foods Potato Processing Facility, and the list goes on as we create an environment that generates more jobs, diversifies our economy, and builds the Alberta advantage. But there are risks that can't be ignored. The geopolitical turmoil is keeping oil prices volatile, and the uncertainty from the layering of harmful and foolish federal policies are preventing Alberta's economy from reaching its full potential and holding back investment and productivity gains, not just in the province, but across the country. More people moving here means more pressure on our roads, hospitals, and schools, and on the doctors, teachers, and other dedicated workers who provide us services. This year, we're entering into contract negotiations with close to 250,000 public sector workers in education, health, post-secondary institutions, and within the government. We're also facing significant debt servicing costs, which are expected to be $3.4 billion in 24-25. Without a responsible plan to pay down debt when we can, we would be on the hook for far more. And then there's the very real and immediate concern of natural disasters and extreme weather events. Last summer's wildfire season burned 2.2 million hectares and forced the evacuation of more than 38,000 people. It also depleted our $1.5 billion contingency, and more than 50 fires continue to burn underground. The ongoing drought is a huge concern for our farmers, for industry, and for all Albertans, especially in the south. Dugouts are dry, and the levels of water in many reservoirs are dangerously low. With little rain predicted on the horizon, we need a responsible plan that will prepare us and our kids for whatever tomorrow may bring. We must spend and plan with the future in mind, making the most out of every available dollar. So let's first take a look at our provincial revenues. Our forecast revenue of $73.5 billion for 24-25 is $2.1 billion lower than the forecast for 23-24. The ups and downs of oil prices have much to do with that, but although resource revenue is down, it's expected to tick up in the next couple of years. We expect to get more for our heavy oil when the Trans Mountain Pipeline opens later this year. The world needs our clean energy, and with TMX, we will get our vast resources to the West Coast more efficiently and increase access to global markets. Corporations continue to invest in Alberta and contribute to our economy and success. And as more people make Alberta their home and find good-paying jobs, we expect to bring in $15.6 billion in personal income tax in 24-25. That's a stable revenue source from hardworking Albertans who support our province and share in our prosperity. Our government is building on Alberta's already strong personal tax advantage and is keeping its promise to Albertans by introducing a new personal income tax bracket of 8% on the first $60,000 of income, saving Albertans up to $760 per year once fully implemented. As we implement the new tax bracket, we must proceed in a responsible way. Based on the current fiscal plan, the government expects to implement the tax cut over 2 years. Albertans will see the full impact of the new tax bracket in 2027. We are taking a responsible staged approach so our revenues continue to support core social programs and the budget remains in surplus. I'm happy to report that ATB, Alberta's largest financial institution, is positioned to declare $100 million of dividends to the province annually, starting in 24-25. These dividends will increase the province's available cash and highlight the value ATB provides to Alberta. The budget does introduce or increase some taxes. To deter smoking and tobacco use and stay aligned with provincial neighbors, Budget 2024 raises taxes on cigarettes and smokeless tobacco. Even though this tax is increasing, Alberta still has the lowest taxes on cigarettes in Western Canada. Alberta will join the existing federal-provincial coordinated vaping tax framework, meaning there will be a new provincial vaping tax. Smoking and vaping continue to be serious public health issues in Alberta, causing considerable harm to many Albertans. So we hope to see revenues from these taxes dwindle over time as more people quit. Alberta is following suit behind Saskatchewan and 44 U.S. jurisdictions like California, Montana, and Oregon by introducing a new annual tax on electric vehicles. Since EV drivers obviously don't pay a fuel tax, this new tax will be their contribution to keep provincial roads maintained and to support other public services. The land titles registration fee is increasing to support and improve the land title system. Even with these tax increases, we continue to have among the lowest taxes in the country. Albertans are charged at least $19 billion less in taxes than they would pay if they lived in any other province. Overall, we are carefully shaping and refining Alberta's competitive tax system. It will remain a generator of stable income that will continue to meet the needs of Albertans in the future. Turning now to provincial expenses. With a forecast expense of $73.2 billion, or a 3.9% increase from last year, Budget 2024 is a responsible plan. It puts Albertans and Alberta families first by investing in strong health care, a modern education system, and supports to keep life affordable. We know health care is the top priority of Albertans. We are targeting dollars to 4 specialized areas to drive improvement and find new, better ways to meet the needs of each patient. We want every Albertan to have their own family doctor or healthcare provider, so we're investing $475 million to strengthen primary care. We're training more rural and Indigenous family doctors and developing a new compensation model for nurse practitioners. We're recruiting and retaining more physicians to underserved communities and helping them keep their medical clinics open. We're also transforming continuing care so seniors can age with dignity in the community, with better access to home care and end-of-life care. And we're investing in new mental health and addiction facilities to keep expanding access to our recovery-oriented system of care in all communities. We're also building a bright future for our children and investing in the success of our families. To address enrollment growth this year, Budget 2024 will allow schools to hire hundreds more teachers. Schools across Alberta will also be able to hire more educational assistants and other support staff to help with specialized learning needs. 43 new school projects are going forward in communities where we are seeing the biggest pressures. These new projects will add 35,000 new and modernized student spaces. In total, there will be 98 new and modernized school projects around the province. Budget 2024 also helps keep life affordable and supports Albertans most affected by inflation and the high costs of living. We're helping build another 3,300 new affordable housing units and finishing 1,800 units already started. We're expanding our rental assistance program to support an additional 550 households in need. We're investing in high-quality services provided in lodges and social housing so seniors and people in need have safe, warm places to call home. By indexing payments of social programs to inflation again, we're providing more support to families, seniors, and people with severe disabilities. Plus, the new 25% discount program is saving seniors up to $20 million each year on medical driving tests and personal registry services. Budget 2024 continues our work to make Alberta a more safe and welcoming place to live and work. We're supporting police and mental health crisis teams to respond together to help people with mental health emergencies. We're adding hundreds of new homeless shelter spaces and supporting women's shelters and programs that work to prevent family violence and sexual assault. Budget 2024 invests in improved access to the court and justice system. Investments will upgrade courtrooms and add more judges, clerks, and staff to handle the mounting number of court cases in good time. And a specialized prosecution service is also being developed. It will focus on making sure violent criminals and gang members face the consequences of their actions. But we're not only protecting Albertans and communities from crime and violence, Budget 2024 also protects our environment and prepares our communities and economy to face future floods and the very real threat of drought and worsening wildfires. That's why we're investing $206 million to enhance the capacity of the province to fight wildfires, including new firefighting equipment. We're upgrading our current air tanker fleet and buying new firefighting equipment. We're also shoring up Alberta's valuable water supply and protecting our communities from both drought conditions and the dangers of floods. With $251 million over 3 years, communities will build more berms, dams, canals, and reservoirs to protect people and properties from floods and droughts. Budget 2024 also supports a number of water projects to protect our province and conserve our landscapes for decades to come. We must provide farmers and agricultural producers a reliable and safe water supply to grow the crops and water the cattle that feed our families and people around the world. The budget invests more than $250 million for irrigation projects across Alberta. We need to do more with the water we have and create long-term plans to protect Albertans for decades to come. We're launching a new strategy to increase water availability across the province and bring our water management into the 21st century. Our goal is to improve water storage infrastructure, enhance water conservation efforts, and upgrade water data systems and water policies. An independent water advisory committee will provide advice and guidance moving forward. And we're investing in many municipal and regional water and wastewater projects. This will ensure Albertans continue to have clean drinking water and communities continue to attract investment and grow. We are making investments across the province to maintain Alberta's competitive advantage. Through Budget 2024, we are attracting more investment, supporting more jobs, and developing a skilled and diversified workforce to keep our economy growing. Budget 2024 provides $724 million this coming year in municipal infrastructure funding through the local government fiscal framework. We've also created a new local growth and sustainability grant program to provide an additional $20 million each year to help fast-growing municipalities fund infrastructure that attracts economic development. We're adding 3,200 seats in apprenticeship programs and expanding learning facilities so that more students can access education in the trades, mechanics, or science. And we're supporting projects such as the Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program and the Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program. This is driving clean technology development, adding more jobs, and helping Alberta reduce emissions. We remain committed to responsible fiscal management and our fiscal framework. We have balanced our budget with spending that can be sustained going forward, and we are using our surplus to strategically pay down maturing debt and save in the Alberta Heritage Savings Trust Fund. After another $3.2 billion debt payment in 23-24, we've paid down our debt by $16.6 billion in the last 2 years. That has saved Albertans hundreds of millions of dollars less in interest payments and fees, and we're also keeping more than $1 billion in investment earnings in the Heritage Fund. And we're topping that up with an additional $2 billion from the Alberta Fund. That brings Alberta's long-term savings account to $25 billion, an invaluable legacy that we are growing for the next generations. We are taking steps to re-energize the vision of rebuilding the Heritage Fund into a generational store of wealth for our children and our grandchildren. We are using the good fortunes of today responsibly so future generations won't be on the hook to pay for our costly decisions. With Budget 2024, we are doing what every responsible Albertan would do. We're taking a hard look at our financial situation from all angles, the expenses we know are coming up, the money we have coming in, and the debt we need to repay. We're investing strategically in the priorities of Albertans, strengthening healthcare and education for our families and children. We're providing communities, businesses, and industry partners with tools to responsibly manage our resources. Together, we can safeguard our land and economy from natural disasters and emergencies. Our commitment to fiscal responsibility and our fiscal framework is ensuring we can sustain a strong Alberta. We are reducing our debt where and when we can, saving for the future, and responsibly growing our economy so our kids and grandkids can enjoy Alberta's economic advantages. This is a budget built for today and for tomorrow. Thank you. I'll turn it back to Savannah and we can start taking questions.
Great, thanks, Minister. We'll now take some questions from media. Just a reminder, it'll be one question, one follow-up. Please state your name and outlet for the record. We'll start here in the room and then we'll go to the phones.
Hi, Graham Thompson with The Star today. Minister, there's a lot of questions this morning about the Alberta Fund and the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. Last week, the Premier made a real show of talking about reinvesting in the fund, Heritage Savings Trust Fund, but yet in today's budget, there's nothing going into the fund next year or the year after. It's growing only because of retained earnings. So can you explain why or how the Premier focuses on this, but the budget does not reflect what the Premier said last week?
Well, I think it does, Graham. So like we said, we're adding $2 billion from the Alberta Fund. So that's due to our surplus that we had in 23-24, and you require an actual cash surplus to be able to do anything, as I'm sure you guys realized in the tech briefing this morning. But the retained earnings is the key. You know, I think over $48 billion has been taken out of the fund since inception in 1976. So I think the retained earnings is the driver, and it will build that timeline the Premier was speaking about. We need to look out multiple decades to grow the fund to a place where we will be able to take revenue off it consistently to help with operating. That's part of the plan, but that will all be released later in the year. It's still early days, but we will have more to say on that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the cash surplus. Like today, according to the civil servants this morning, this is an accounting surplus. So isn't this misleading Albertans by basically you're borrowing money into to get the Alberta fund to use that. You're borrowing money, but yet you're claiming you have a surplus. But it's not a cash surplus, it's an accounting surplus. So isn't that misleading Albertans about the state of the budget?
Not in any way, Graham, or not in any way that we can control. So we have, you probably saw Alberta got an A+ in financial transparency. I think we're the only province in the country to get that. But we follow, strict reporting guidelines laid out by the Auditor General. So this is how it has to be presented. I agree with you, it's confusing. I'm not an accountant, but you're not wrong. To have extra money to either pay down principal and debt or make a deposit in the Heritage Fund, it requires a cash surplus. Where we sit today, the best way that I can, communicate it, Alberta would need a $3 billion surplus to not require further borrowing, and a $2 billion surplus to maintain or not erode its net debt position.
Great, thanks. Well, next question.
Hi, Minister. Brianna Karsten-Smith with Global News. Maybe on that train of thought, in terms of the debt, you're talking about paying down debt, and yes, 23, 24, there's that payment, but we're seeing it grow into the 80 billion sort of figure. Can you explain then, because as mentioned, you're borrowing money in order to be able to say, we're putting money into the Heritage Fund, we're paying for capital, and we are also having a surplus, but then we're also growing the debt.
Well, I think you have to think about it in the specific fiscal years. So what the fiscal framework requires us to do.
But it's a 3-year budget.
Sure, but you're talking about when you can pay down debt and when you can make a deposit in the Heritage Fund. So that's what the fiscal framework basically forces us to do in 23-24. So we're making another debt repayment of $3.2 billion plus the $2 billion into the Heritage Fund. Budget 24 is far tighter. So we're looking like we're in a much different position in this year. The fiscal situation does get better in the out years, but frankly, that's what I've been saying all year, is that we knew budget 2024 was going to be more difficult. That's why decisions were made that we had to reinstate the fuel tax and things like that to maintain the position that we're in. But I would say when it comes to debt repayment, when it comes to the Heritage Fund deposits, that's why it's so important in the good years, in the years where you have a surplus, that you spend it wisely. You don't increase your operating spending line because you're having a good year. And I think that's what it speaks to. But you're also allowing the retained earnings to stay in the Heritage Fund. Over $1 billion this year. Every other year previously, it would have naturally gone into the general revenue fund, and a politician would have had to make a decision to then take it out and put it in the Heritage Fund. Now that's reversed. A politician would have to make a decision to take it out of the Heritage Fund and put it into general revenue.
One of the big talking points that the Premier had last week as well was the capping spending to inflation plus population. So you're using an inflation plus population rate of 6.2%. You're using a total expenses of 3.9%, which is a large discrepancy. So you're keeping it well below that number. But you're also encouraging more people to come to Alberta by doing things like that $5,000 grant for skilled trade workers. So it seems like we are encouraging more people to come, but we're not doing the spending to keep up with population growth and inflation. So square that peg for me.
Sure, good question. So I'd say the inflation plus population number, when it comes to our fiscal rules, is always meant to be a ceiling, not a floor. That's something that we couldn't cross. We obviously aren't crossing it this year, like you said, 3.9% increase in spending. When it comes to the people that we're continuing to see, Albertans, new Albertans, choosing to make their life here, that's great, but we still have a sincere need for specialized skilled labor. Things like the Dow project itself can have the potential to completely drain the province of certain types of skilled labor. So I think when Jobs, Economy and Trade fully rolls out that program, I think you'll see that the criteria will be very specific. So if that answers your question, we're seeing a lot of Albertans, but we're still short some of these specific skills.
Great, thanks. Next question at the mic.
Yeah, Duncan Kinney from the Progress Report. Nice to meet you. Your civil servants are forecasting a 1.7 billion loss over the next between 2023 and 2027 with the Sturgeon refinery, just bleeding red ink over the 500 million here, 550 there. Is there any plan to address this kind of ongoing open sore with regards to just bleeding money?
It's a great question. I think it's a great example for people in government to stay out of business. I look at it every briefing I get. The Sturgeon refinery, I think the number that is top of mind to me, I think in 24-25, it's showing a loss of 468 million. I think your 3-year combined number is accurate in the forecast. Combination of things, lower diesel prices is creating a lot of that. But also just the cost to build the thing, the debt requirements that are ongoing. So yes, the short answer is yes. The Premier has spoke to Energy, I know, and said, we'd like to look at options. We'd like to see, are Albertans going to be fitting this bill forever going forward, or will something change drastically with any of those variables that will put it in a different position? So that question's been asked, but I haven't heard what the options are coming back.
Okay. And a somewhat related note too, we now know the full kind of financial implications of the move to privatize Alberta Precision Labs and then renationalize it. It's $31.5 million. Is there anything from this process that you've learned or your colleagues have learned with regards to kind of privatizing healthcare services?
Well, I would say I think your numbers are accurate. I think it's 31 million was the difference between the assets and liabilities. So that's what AHS paid Dynalife, and I think our overall costs incurred going forward for health will be about 11 million annually. But yeah, I think supreme diligence needs to be had when you're considering any of these options. I wasn't there when those discussions were made, but yeah, I think there's still questions. I know Dynalife is successful in other provinces, but it certainly didn't work here.
Thanks, Minister. Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
David Staples, Edmonton Journal. Hi, Minister. Tax cut has been delayed till 2027, and the document, the budget talks document now says it's contingent. When the promise was made, I don't remember it being contingent. So what would you say to Albertans who might question suddenly that tax cut now seems fully in doubt?
Well, I wouldn't say fully in doubt, David. We've laid out the plan here to legislate in 25 and bring it in 26, 27. I know the Premier's been clear that, she gave me multiple things that I had to accomplish in my mandate letter. One of them was the tax cut, but also, staying within our fiscal framework and balancing the budget. So I'm going to do my best to do both of those things in the out years, and I don't think it's in question at all. I think it'd be let's say oil goes to $20, and then the Premier may have a decision on her hands. But I know as of today, we've put it in the budget. That is the plan.
When the promise was made, it was talked about the tax cut cost, the cost of it being $1 billion. Now that you've dug into it more, what is the current number for what that tax cut would cost the provincial government?
The number that sticks in my head is $1.4 billion. That's at 8% over a full year.
Great, thanks, Minister. Operator, please put through the next caller.
Bob Weber, Canadian Press.
budgeting for a surplus of $367 million, but the contingency fund that you've put aside is $900 million less than was actually spent last year. How likely is it, do you think, that that surplus will be realized, given that we're likely going to be facing another hot and dry summer?
Great question. Yeah, the wildfire bill came in at somewhere north of 800 million, and then the lion's share of the rest of the contingency was used on AFSC crop insurance and moisture deficiency insurance indemnities. That fund was entirely depleted, and then jointly, us and the federal government, there's a statutory process in place that when that happens, we kick the fund up again. That's at a 75-25% ratio, 75 for the feds, 25 for us. We do get some of that back over time once the fund is replenished. So yeah, we know we're starting in a rough spot. There's 60 wildfires that burned through the winter. I think when I was forestry minister, there was 6. So it's definitely an outlier the year that we're in, and I think it's certainly possible. But the whole idea around a contingency is you don't want to budget for, you could make it as high as you want, I guess, but you do need it to be realistic. We thought 1.5 was too low. A $500 million increase is a big increase, and so we'll be monitoring the situation closely, and there is some belief that there's a brighter outlook for Alberta when it comes to the summer precipitation, but we'll see where it takes us.
All right. And you spoke earlier about education. I did some quick math this morning, and it seems that private schools are getting roughly 4 times the increase on a percentage basis that public schools are, just the K-12 envelope. Can you explain why that is, please?
I think that's a question better directed at the education minister. I would have to dig into that. I don't have that for you, but you're not wrong. 4.4% increase in health and education, and when you look at the fact that we're only increasing spending 3.9%, means that other areas aren't increasing at the same rate. Health, education, advanced education, they make up about 61% of this budget. So everything that happens in those ministries has a very big impact on the overall budget of the province.
Great. Operator, next caller, please.
Kelly Kreiderman, Globe and Mail. Hi, Minister. I'm wondering what has changed since last November when you gave the fiscal update, and you talked about, or you had a target of this year's surplus being over $2 billion. What has changed so drastically to bring our surplus almost to a technical surplus only level, and to bring the province's finances to such a knife's edge, it seems, this year?
Yeah, it's a combination of things across the board, Kelly. Debt servicing costs escalating, the needs of the contingency in the year that we're in, and the overall position that we're left in. Other pressures due to the population increase that we've seen across ministries. So it's a number of things, but we could definitely see it coming. We knew budget 2024 was going to be far more difficult.
And when you talk about Alberta following accounting standards and that being the definition of the surplus in terms of the overall, even though we are borrowing this year, even though we're going to go into debt more, is there a year in the past that is anything like this one where we're declaring a surplus, but we're actually going into debt? We're actually in a negative cash position?
Well, I'd have to do some digging on that, Kelly, to see what other years have been similar to this. But when you leave retained earnings in the Heritage Fund or any of these other agencies, that will become more and more common. It'll require bigger surpluses to have more cash. Really, the big cash requirement is for the capital plan. That's the big piece, and that's always been at the end of the year. But the retained earnings in these agencies is the big driver.
Great, thanks, Minister. Operator, next caller, please.
Rick Bell, Coast Media.
Good afternoon, Minister. Simple question. Once this budget is public, there's going to be, I'm sure, a lot of people who would have liked to have seen more spending in the budget than what you're spending, probably spending closer to that inflation population growth. What do you say to those people who will say you're not spending enough in this 2024 budget?
Well, I'm sure there's always going to be criticisms. I think I've already heard some from both directions. But I would say, we've taken a really hard look at what we are spending on. We think that this is the appropriate number to spend, and we've really tried to prioritize it within this budget. I referenced the increases in health and education specifically in the school builds. I think you'll see a lot of intention around schools in the capital plan, as I laid out in my remarks. So I think we're spending what we can. We still have increasing debt service costs that we're seeing. We are not predicting to be in a cash surplus position in the out years. So I'd say we're trying to do everything. We're trying to strike the right balance between saving for the future, managing our debt responsibly, and making sure that we have the infrastructure for a growing province. It hasn't been easy, but I'm pleased with where it's landed. I think we have struck that balance.
And the supplementary question, Minister, is this is the budget as projected, as predicted, as forecasted. Let's just say the situation gets a lot better, and this has happened in Alberta before, as you know, with oil and gas, and there's more money than you expected, maybe even billions more money than you anticipated. And what will immediately happen is there will be a huge appetite to spend that money, even though your plan calls for, if that were to happen, for debt repayment and putting money into the Heritage Fund. What will you then say, and we've seen this movie before, that when if the times we have now get better and there's more money coming to you than you forecasted, and people say, spend that $2 billion or $3 billion or $4 billion or $10 billion, how are you going to still preach the plan you have if there's a lot more money coming in?
Well, I think because it's the right plan, Rick. So I think you've heard a lot of commitment from the Premier. The fiscal rules obviously help immensely. One thing we are doing is we're amending the legislation to provide a little more flexibility when the Premier and Cabinet make that decision for a one-time spend out of the Alberta Fund. If we were in that fortunate position that you described and there was more money in the Alberta Fund, just to try to make that possible. The way the rules are set up now, it really isn't possible just because of the year you have to account for it in and some of the other fiscal rules. So we're going to do that. So the Premier will have more of an option for a one-time spend in a great surplus year. But I think what we're showing is a sustainable operating line spend. If we're in that great year, we will be able to pay down some more debt and decrease that line and hopefully invest in the Heritage Fund again and even increase those retained earnings and hopefully shorten up the timeline the Premier's talked about till it's large enough to be of value on the operating side again.
Great, thanks, Minister. We're going to come back here in the room. So first on the mic, please go ahead.
Hi, Jeremy Appel with the Progress Report. I was hoping you could tell me more about the $24 million in the K-12 education budget over the next 3 years that's being put towards funding growth for new private schools and daycares. How are those funds going to do that?
I hate to disappoint you, Jeremy, but I think you're going to have to ask the education minister. I don't, I'm not that granular on that today.
Right, fair. This might also be a similar answer from you in terms of the advanced education budget. There's $391 million for student aid in private career colleges support. What does that entail? Why is student aid in private career colleges being categorized together?
I think because of the need. I think that's framed that way because they saw a substantial need in the private career colleges on student loans and aid. But I can get you a better answer, but I think that's the way it's framed that way.
Oh, so it's student aid for private career colleges?
Yes, I believe so.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense than the way I read it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, great, thanks. Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, Catherine Gurkowski, Alberta Today. So you mentioned that even health, your top at 4.4% increase, is well below population and inflation growth. You mentioned the strain on the healthcare system. So if it's not keeping up, something's have to give. So where are people going to feel the pinch in that budget?
Well, I guess I would say, the population numbers are real. So that's why we keep coming back to schools, keep discussing the needs within the healthcare system. Where they'll see the pinch, I think from what I've been briefed by Minister LaGrange, they're confident, through their refocusing efforts and kind of a changing direction and focusing more on the front lines and serving the patient, that she's going to be able to deploy those funds more efficiently in the future. So I'm of the opinion that it's the right number for Alberta today.
And you had mentioned the 250,000 public sector workers who are bargaining right now. I'm wondering, does the budget account for any increases that will be negotiated, or are you going to have to come back with a supply bill, or how is that going to work out?
Well, we can only budget for what's known, but I really can't comment on anything to do with the public sector compensation. Those tables are live. Certainly only want to communicate in good faith, have the utmost respect for our entire public service, and I'm confident that they'll land in the appropriate place. It's a very robust process that looks at, evidence-driven, market-driven, cross-jurisdictional analysis. So I don't have much more to say about that other than I have, faith in the process.
Great, thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Aparajita Raman. I'm staff reporter at the Gateway. In 2022, the University of Alberta's president said that he's been advocating for deconsolidation of the U of A's financial statements with the government of Alberta, from the government to Alberta accounts. Where are we at with deconsolidation with the U of A?
Well, I certainly don't want to throw the Auditor General under the bus. That would not be a wise move on my behalf. But I think that's where that ask failed. That it wasn't seen to be possible the way it was framed is what I understand.
And my second question is, how did the government decide how much money to allocate to post-secondary operating costs?
Well, as Treasury Board, we looked at the asks of the minister and we tried to respond appropriately.
Go ahead.
Hi, Minister. Julia Wong, CBC News. I just want to ask you a little bit more about the Heritage Fund, because I know we're putting some into it this year, but then none for the next 2 years. And I'm wondering, with that strategy, how you expect to get to up to $400 billion. I know that you said that we will see more details in the future, but some of those numbers don't seem to add up for me.
Well, I think the range was 250 to 400 million, was what was communicated. The 250 million is entirely possible just on retained earnings. But I think as long as we're committed to considering deposits in the future when we're in that surplus position, I think it's a great thing to consider. You always have to weigh it against the opportunity to pay down more debt. But the fund will grow. You know, compounding is an amazing thing, especially when we're talking about multiple decades. So those numbers are all realistic, and you make a deposit when you can.
And I'd just like to ask you a little bit more about the electric vehicle tax. I know that you said Saskatchewan has this, but other provinces are offering incentives to people to purchase these types of vehicles. Alberta wants to tax them. It might seem like Alberta isn't interested in helping people help bring emissions down.
Well, I'm interested in fixing the roads, and I think all Albertans would like to do their part in making sure we can maintain our highway infrastructure. If you look around, I think 43 or 44 U.S. jurisdictions have already done this or are in the process of doing this. So we just looked at aligning it with the what an average Albertan driver would pay in fuel tax over the course of a year. And you've seen the revenue line. We need everyone to help.
Go ahead.
Marc-Antoine Leblanc, Radio-Canada. Considering the surplus of $400 million, I just wonder if the fires are even worse than expected, for example, or the WTI drops, what's your plan basically?
Well, when you have a fire or an emergency situation, I don't think any Albertans need to worry. We'll be there, and we'll deal with the consequences in this room the next year. I don't know. Even this year, we spent above the contingency. There are exemptions within the fiscal framework that allow you to do that, especially around emergency situations or sudden drastic declines in revenue.
And I just want to go back to the tax cut, because during the campaign, the UCP promised a tax cut. Then Smith said it's going to be in a year. Then it's over 2 years. So I'm just wondering, basically the UCP is breaking a promise, because if I'm not mistaken, there was no question of the 2 years period.
Well, I was on that campaign and pretty active, and I know it was promised, and it will be fulfilled. Like the Premier said, we're going to do multiple things, including balance the budget. So I think, well, I certainly hope Albertans respect that.
Jonathan Bradley, Western Standard.
Just one more thing. I don't mean to interrupt you, Jonathan. I'll get back to you. Just one more comment around the tax cut. It should also be mentioned that one of the first things we did was re-index the basic personal exemption. So the tax relief that all Albertans saw by doing that in the last fiscal year and every fiscal year that will follow is about $1 billion, $980 million that saved Albertans, and we did that immediately. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. So you said all Albertans think about future generations. How do you want Budget 2024 to be remembered by future generations?
Well, I think this striking the right balance, this balanced approach. Like I said, we're doing a few things. We're saving for the future. We're spending on the infrastructure we need today. We're managing our debt. We made the analogy in my opening remarks to the decisions a household makes, and I view this very much the same way, in the sense that people have debt in their lives, especially their mortgages, say on their house. They see value in that debt, but they know that their operating day-to-day expenses, if they're incurring debt there or putting it on the credit card, that will cause severe challenges in the future. So viewing this the same way. The Heritage Fund, even though we'd like to see the returns increase, and I hope that's part of the plan we can communicate later in the year, I think they had an average 10-year netted out return of 8.4% over the last 10 years. The average of our debt currently, although increasing, is still under 4%. So when you're thinking of this in the net position of the province, like a lot of this conversation has been, there's value there, and then you let it compound and you have the commitment to leave it there.
Okay. Budget 2024 is your first budget as finance minister. What did you learn as you prepared this budget?
That you have to say no about 98% of the time, and it's a very tough process. I don't mean to be flippant there, but you know, everybody you know, could use more, and there's many great defensible ideas and proposals that you really want to dig in and look at. But it certainly wasn't easy to land here, even though, you know, 367 million is probably less than some were expecting. That it's a sincere challenge every year, and for different reasons. But the process, gained a lot of respect for the process. The amazing public servants that help us elected people work through that process. People that frankly are far too qualified and get paid not enough to have that important of a role within this province, but they do it because, you know, they love it and they think it's important, and very grateful that they're there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. We're going to go, we only have a few more minutes left, so I'm going to go to the phones, take one more question, then we're going to circle back to the room for one more question. So, operator, please put through the first caller.
Jeremy Thompson, CTV.
Yeah, hi there. Thanks for taking my question here. Just going to walk away from the feedback that I'm getting in the room here. Pardon me. So yeah, just a few more questions on the wildfire preparedness. I know you talked already about sort of the contingency fund and setting aside, you know, $2 billion for this year. I guess, what all can you say about other investments that the province is making to fight what is expected to be quite a severe season?
Yeah, great question, and I know Minister Lowen has spoke about this some, and he'll speak more in the coming days. But they've already began the process. They have obviously firefighters that have worked through the winter. This funding will allow them to add more crews and get them on the ground. Some of the investment is around technology, around dealing with fires during the night. I don't want to get in too much detail there and scoop Minister Lowen, but some great investments there. Also, potential for different contracting options upcoming. I know they relied on a lot of different people and learned a lot of things in the last wildfire season, especially when they were getting really close to endangering communities. And also long-term, I think it was mentioned, but we have a plan in the out years of the capital plan to update our air tanker fleet. That'll take quite a while, but you have to get the order in first, and then delivery may take up to 6 or 7 years, I believe. But yeah, so we're trying to deal with it now and for the future.
Okay, a complete change of subject here for my follow-up. I just sort of, in the simplest possible terms, I guess, how can you explain to Albertans, you know, this surplus deficit situation? You know, how are we borrowing $2.4 billion while still reporting a $367 million surplus?
Well, the easiest way I can describe it is you're choosing to somewhat. You know, we could have left the retained earnings in the Heritage Fund and had those in general revenue. Then we probably wouldn't have been in a position where we would have chose to make that deposit because things are so tight. We're making the choice to leave it there, and it causes us to need the cash at the end of the year for our cash position. So I think if I'd ask Albertans to think of it that way, it's about choices they're making between debt they're willing to take on and savings that they want to make, probably because they see that value in the returns and the long-term vision. You know, I can imagine there's Albertans that would have, you know, savings that would be enough to eliminate all their debt, but they choose not to because they have the savings has that value for them, and they know what it'll mean in the future.
Great, thanks, Minister. As promised, we're going to come right back to the room for one more question.
Thank you. Darcy Ropchan, City News. I just had a follow-up to the electric vehicle tax question. In the report, it says it's expected to generate $8 million by 26-27, I believe. You mentioned it was partly about repairing roads, but that seems to be a drop in the bucket compared to the provincial budget. Like, why not tax larger vehicles as well if it's about road damage?
Well, we do through the fuel tax. But I'd say it's, Prime Minister Trudeau said they're not even going to make gas-powered vehicles after 2035 or something. So we better prepare for the future, I guess, if this is all that's going to be there to maintain these roads.
And just to that end, you mentioned fuel tax as well. Electric vehicle owners aren't paying it. If the gas tax ever is suspended, would electric vehicle owners ever see any relief coming their way?
It would be a challenge to implement because of the annual nature. But I'm sure there would be a consideration.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Just a quick thing. If you didn't get to answer or ask your question, you can email tbf.communications@gov.ab.ca, and we'll do our best to get your answer ASAP. Thank you.